Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and we are back with another innovator interview. This time we're going to be talking with Buck Sleeper, who's the Director of Innovation Consulting at EPAM Continnum. That's EPAM Continuum. And you can find them at continuuminnovation.com. That's one long word, continuuminnovation.com. Now, inventing sustainable products and services is a growth industry, and EPAM is a leader in that category. We're going to need that if we're going to sustain human prosperity. We have to invent new sustainable products and services that will allow us to live well, but not take it out of the earth. And EPAM recently completed a survey that found that 79% of consumers feel that low or zero waste packaging is a priority when making a purchase. In fact, 20% of respondents said they'd be willing to eat the packaging that their food comes in. And another 20% said they want to be able to repurpose packaging for other uses. So you can imagine unwrapping food and then potentially using the packaging to do something else in your home. So we're talking today with Buck about how to invent products and services for the circular economy, as well as how we as consumers can exert greater influence on companies so that they make more progress faster. The firm works with companies in healthcare, financial services, consumer goods, including food packaging, makeup, and consumer technology, and other industries, as well as on projects to reduce poverty and to improve sanitation and access to water around the world. They recently released the trends report I just mentioned about the future of the economy, and we want to take a look ahead at the prospects for making progress towards a sustainable society. Buck, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, Mitch.
Well, hey, it was a fascinating report, and we wanted to talk to you about it. Let me start with one of the 6 key ideas that you identified in the NXT 2021 Trends Report. And that's a pivot away from globalization to some extent and towards localization. You don't see the end of local globalization, but a realignment. So what does the relocalized global economy look like as we emerge from the pandemic? Could you tell us about that?
Sure. So one of the kind of the notions that I've really loved to hear people talk about as we've understood the new normal post-pandemic is not that this pandemic has brought along the death of cities, but the rebirth of the neighborhood. And so I think that's what we're focusing a lot on is what are these smaller communities? What is their identity? What holds them together? But then more broadly, what actually connects them? And these communities, these neighborhoods, these can be the physical spaces immediately around us. And they can also have a broader meaning when it comes to businesses and partnerships. And I think one of the meta trends, the mega trends that we're seeing when it comes to doing business, in particular around CPG work, is that more and more companies are looking for partners, for consortiums, and for really going into product design as a group and in collaboration with other companies.
So you see brands and service providers being more embedded in the local community, even if they're not located there. They'll have people there. It sounds like is what you're saying, and that they will have access to expertise to help their customers in those local communities.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. So on the one hand, we're seeing more and more platforms and opportunities for smaller groups to have a global presence. So the growth of platforms like Shopify, which allow cottage industry to quickly go direct to consumer and create their own storefront. And on the other side, we're seeing larger brands being more nimble and trying out a new array of products. So in our work looking at the restaurant industry and food service, we're seeing a huge growth in what we're calling virtual restaurants or virtual brands.
Right.
Smaller splinter organizations that make the most of excess capacity and stand up a new product type or offering.
So does EPAM advise its clients to build products in fewer locations that are closer to customers? How do you explain to a company that they need to be more intimately involved with all of these local communities?
Part of it begins with listening. So a big part of the work that I do is in ethnography and consumer research. That's quantitative in nature. We do a lot of survey work and looking at the data that's coming off of our client systems. And then a big part of that is spending an equal amount of time in people's living rooms and kitchens, their offices, their places of work, to understand what they really need. And so it's this combination of the what they're doing and why they're doing it that is the key driver of that dialogue. So I think to your question, I think the big driver here is making sure that you're in conversation, and not just listening to your consumers, but actually having that back and forth and having the a way to take feedback and be actionable on it.
I have to ask a little more pointed version of the question. So you're saying, don't surveil your customers, actually engage in a conversation with them.
That's absolutely right. So data privacy, I think this is something that people know they're being surveilled. We know the cost of surveilling someone is higher to you than it is the cost of them finding a new shampoo brand, restaurant to go eat at. And so the kind of the information that you're finding about your consumers is very hard won. It's a big investment. It's very easy for people to switch away when they don't think that data is being used appropriately. Furthermore, what we've found is that people actually want to know what you've learned about them, not just for transparency, but also from what that tells us about our own behaviors. And I think that that's probably key to some of the conversations we're having here today around our own personal impact when it comes to sustainability.
And so that does raise the question of do you find that the corporations are really interested in customer perception at this point? Are they ready to listen, or are they more inclined to surveil? What do you find in those conversations?
I would say 100% ready to listen and have that dialogue.
That's good to hear. Now, let's talk about another aspect of how we perceive our locality in the pandemic. The global supply chain didn't hold up particularly well there in the pandemic. And the way that I look at this is it's sort of a preface to what we're going to see as particularly sea level rise disrupts supply chains. How are you advising the clients you work with to think about reliance on distant production services, sending work to Asia, for instance, rather than building a factory here in the States, because you don't potentially lose contact with your production source because the port is no longer viable that you rely on shipping. How do you explain that? Do companies also get that we just got a taste of the future?
I think absolutely. And it's interesting looking specifically at supply chains and what broke and what didn't. I think that food and groceries is a really great example. I think if we think back to 12 months ago, cleaned out shelves in supermarkets, the inability to get toilet paper and other staples. And at the same time, you had restaurants and other food service clients who had full stock rooms, full supply chains. And so what we found is that there are multiple supply chains and they're just not very well connected. And the ability for one supplier to quickly pivot from selling food to a grocery store as opposed to selling it to a restaurant was just not possible when it came to not only inventory management, but also the contractual realities of their business. And so what we're advising clients to do is to have a real shift towards understanding real-time data, inventory management, and their ability to redeploy workers or assets. But what that means is we're going to have to completely rebuild the back of house systems so that we can compile data in real time, understand where there are needs, and be able to quickly pivot to where we need to redirect things.
So resilience means that the supply chains are more permeable. And that, of course, means we need even more technology. But I think I just heard you also say that no matter what, we're going to have to reinvent the economy. So it's also a good time to implement sustainable approaches as we do that.
I think that's absolutely right. And as we rebuild this, we not only have to look at what information can we capture, how quickly we can capture, but how can we make it really actionable? How can we get it into the hands of the right decision makers at the right time so that you're not completely overwhelmed by everything in front of you, but you actually know what to do with it at the right moment.
Now, another of the major findings that really struck me was that you find that recent changes in the global economy suggest that, and this is a quote, "we are on the cusp of a new regulatory environment," unquote, that will emphasize adaptation and resilience as policy goals. So do you see at the global level global standards for product quality and safety, or do you expect to see continued checkerboard approaches where each nation or even each state, as in the United States, has different regulatory environments?
Yeah, I think it's both.
Okay.
So one of the things that I'm really interested in and optimistic about in our own world when it comes to sustainability and our professional services, and I'll start there, is that our clients are asking more questions about our own footprint, whether that's the eco-friendliness of our buildings, the way in which our staff has access to public transportation, even what kind of cups are being used in our kitchens and galleys, as a way of understanding our perspective on sustainability and resiliency broadly before we even get into the work. And this isn't just specific to EPAM, but it's a major shift that we're seeing across professional services. So I think there's a huge push towards this level of responsibility across the business world, which is really cool to see. From an adaptation point of view, I think that not only are corporations kind of aware of the pressure and the ask that's coming from their consumers and advocating on behalf of them, but they're also creating really interesting back of house systems that can customize based on different regulations. And in I think a very clear example of that is if we look at local labor laws against, say, a scheduling system, the companies that are going to be successful and competitive in the market are those that can actually create business plans and processes that both work at the macro level and are able to accommodate all of these, as you call them, checkerboard laws and regulations.
So do you anticipate in the future customers being able to sort of interrogate a product or a service and its supply chain to see whether or not they are buying something that they feel comfortable with? You know, could I say, for instance, specify that I want to purchase a new computer. I want to make sure that it was built under humane circumstances, that it was it used recycled materials rather than virgin ore, things like that. Are we talking about a world in which the customer literally says, I don't want it if it has slavery or trafficking involved in it?
I think so. The demand is there, and I think the technology is catching up. So our ability to actually track and trace every single component in a real way, and not just kind of a marketing storytelling way, is maturing. And so I think that the reality of that kind of level of transparency and being able to track a final product, not only all the way through the supply chain that got you there, but where it's going next, is close. And then the other part around being able to customize your own ask, yes, that's my hope, is that you could be able to walk into a restaurant and say, show me your vegan options, show me your vegetarian options, and not just get the 3 menu items that they may have set aside for you, but that the entire restaurant and menu can actually be curated and customized to your own needs and preferences.
Yeah, and actually I can envision not even visiting the restaurant, but doing that prior to the arrival at the restaurant, so that as part of my selection, for instance, if I were going to eat a vegan meal, I would also want it to be grown using restorative agriculture or regenerative agriculture. And so, we're almost at the beginning of a completely personalized world, or what you actually called in the 2020s the Me to Be era. Talk a little more about what me to be means.
Sure. Me to be is all about, as you said, personalization and really being able to set the conversation on your own terms. And so your point about being able to, walk into that restaurant and order it the way that you want. The flip side of that is that we're going to get better information about our customers to be able to then change our supplier network, our purchasing decisions to reflect that. But what it really means is that customers have to be in the driver's seat, and not just what we think they want, and not just what they may have identified in terms of preference on that day, but understanding that there are days when I need a vegetarian sandwich, and there are days when I need comfort food, and it's fine that I can be two people at the same time. And so this is why we talk a lot about customer modes as opposed to customer demographics. We're emotional beings. We have different needs from hour to hour. And the ability for a product or a service or a restaurant to meet us where we are will be the difference between whether we return or whether we try our hand somewhere else.
Your report also emphasizes the importance of digital communities and how that's reshaping business. And of course, that's related to what we're talking about now. How do you see consumers signaling their intentions and reshaping products that they'll buy today? And where do you see that going as we move into the 2020s?
Sure. One of the things I've been personally fascinated with over the past 12 months, it's accelerated, but it's been happening for a while, is the rise of the virtual product. So I mentioned virtual brands before. This is a little bit different, but we're talking about say fast fashion items that you buy online and only exist in your Instagram feed or only exist on your Fortnite avatar.
Right.
These are real branded items by companies that you can have affiliations with, but they don't actually exist. And so I think as these digital communities grow, products and services are going to mature alongside them. And so I think that the conversation around sustainability and product and community all go hand in hand. I think what remains to be seen is a Fortnite T-shirt of a lower carbon footprint than a T-shirt from a fast fashion brand. I think we need to do more work to interrogate that.
It would be really easy to dig into a big conversation about blockchain and all the things you can do with a distributed ledger, but let's keep it at a level that's somewhat understandable. So as I listen to what you're saying, I'm thinking about what consumers need to do in order to have the influence that they want to have. And it sounds like becoming educated, and there really is no limit to how educated you can become if you put your mind to it, is the key to being more influential. Is that a misreading of what you're saying?
So I think education is a big part of it. But on the other hand, we still make decisions based on what we need right in front of us. And I'll return to the statistic that you quoted in your introduction, that 79% of consumers feel that zero or low waste packaging is a priority. That's true. We heard that in our research. But as you dig deeper into the research, we also had people force rank different considerations against the kind of the eco-friendliness. And so when you put price and taste, we were looking specifically at yogurt in this. So look at price and taste and brand, the functionality of the package. Is it dairy or non-dairy? Each of these things quickly pushes sustainability almost to the bottom of the list. Okay. And so while eco-consciousness and the impact that the product or the service that you're buying is front of mind, a lot of the other choices that you're making can supplant it. And so we can get into a deeper conversation around how you create a great value prop that allows a sustainable product to be front of mind for consumers. But I think it also is really important for people to, as they educate themselves on the impact of their work, also be clear about what they need and why they need it.
So in one way, we're talking about what we would think of today as badging or ranking services. This is more or less green or fair trade labor or various things. And the trade-offs are what each of us have to think about in terms of our own values. But it seems to me that a lot of companies are trying to invent their own rankings rather than finding common rankings. This also goes back to the conversation about standards we were having a few moments ago. Do we need a system for communicating the sustainability of various components of a product, including the social equity components of the product, so that people can set their preferences and make decisions based on established information that has been reviewed by somebody other than the company, or at least is all aligned to scientific measurements so that they're comparable?
Yeah, I think we do. I mean, one of the gold standards and something that we often reference in, we have a series called This or That, where we look at two very similar products or experiences and we rank them. And we've always come back to carbon, the carbon footprint as kind of the one thing that we can look at from a sustainability. And we haven't gotten into the social responsibility part of this. But we ask questions like this or that. Should I use a paper towel or should I use the hand dryer? Should I stream a movie on my laptop or stream a movie on my phone? Back in the days, it was, should I stream a movie on Netflix or get a DVD in the mail? Right. Should I grow a beard or, should I be clean shaven, things like that. And so I think it's really useful to have markers such as carbon output. And that's the kind of the functional tactical side of it. I think we also need better storytelling when it comes to what's happening along the way. And we've seen a lot of greenwashing when it comes to peaks inside factories, or a look at the farm where your food was made. And we need a more robust set of standards that helps people know if this is marketing or if this is reality.
Just based on the way that we think about politics now, do you think people are looking to the government to establish that kind of standard, or is that something that needs to come from the private sector?
I'd like to say it's both. I think what a broad government control or set of standards would enable is some consistency across states, across countries. And, you mentioned the kind of the proliferation of these various standards or badging. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's all moving in the right direction. And to your point around education, more information out there is better than less, but it needs to be served up in a way that is easily accessible for people to read about it or view it, and also legible. So, looking broadly at languages and age levels and the different ways in which people consume information to make sure that you're speaking to your broadest audience possible.
And I agree with what you're saying. It's been really interesting to watch as the various standards start to converge too. The badging, somebody's badging idea takes precedence, and then everybody starts to follow that because we're animals. We tend to travel in herds.
Sure.
As EPAM looks at the 2020s, how would you, looking back, say 10 years ago, change the advice that you give to clients going into the next decade? What would you not tell them to do in the 2020s that you might have told them to do 10 years ago?
Sure. So I think one of the things that we've learned again and again when working on projects around sustainability specifically is that you really can't lead with sustainability as your value prop. And I was mentioning that just a moment ago.
Yep.
but that you need to look at what people actually need and then attach their value prop to that. And I think a company like Tesla is a really great example where, yes, you get an electric car, but it's also going to be the fastest car on the road. It's always going to have updated software, and it's going to be really safe for your family. The fact that it's also a sustainable option is a benefit. It's not the core benefit that most people are looking at when buying. So if we want sustainability to become more mainstream, we have to have mainstream conversations.
Do we need to enlarge the concept of sustainability then, so it's not just purely environmental, so that it's more about how do we create the world we want? And that engages customers at so many different levels. So it could be pretty powerful.
That's right. Another example of insights from the yogurt research project that I mentioned was when looking at the kind of the responsibility of a yogurt product, our respondents are much more interested in creating a happy cow than they are in creating a happy package. And so people are smart enough to know that a package that's made from recycled materials, perhaps is easily disposed or composted, can still be sitting on top of an extremely toxic supply chain.
Right.
And what they really want to do is dig beneath the surface and understand everything that it took to get that package there.
So over the next 5 years, what are the big technical innovations that you expect to see that are going to change our trajectory towards a sustainable future?
So we've already talked a little bit about track and trace. Sounds like this will be our follow-up conversation, Mitch, about having that asset level accountability for every part of your product throughout its life cycle. Two more really exciting things that we're playing around with that we think are going to be important. One is computer vision. So looking at image processing through monocular cameras, so just a single camera, to understand how are people behaving, what's on a shelf, how do people respond emotionally to one thing or another, and having that real-time information that's telling us a little bit more than we would have been able to see with a much more expansive or expensive sensor suite, and make that actionable in real time. So computer vision. And then the final one that's really been accelerated by this lockdown is the growth of remote experiences. So that can be exercise, shopping, work, all of the things that we're now doing a little bit closer to home, that are going to reduce not only the redundancy in buildings and infrastructure, but reduce the amount of time and travel it takes to do these various things.
And that really, to me, represents the big opportunity for businesses to start to combine products and experience. And the experience ends up being incremental revenue as well. Peloton being a good example. They sell a physical device that we all knew 10 years ago, but now you can participate in a group experience through the device.
That's absolutely right. And that Peloton is not successful because they figured out how to ship a bike to your home. Peloton is successful because they have figured out how to create a recurring media and content platform that's fun enough to get you coming back and telling your friends about it. So I think experience and its integration with technology and business is the linchpin to making this work.
And I think that's the key to the future of prosperity. But let me ask one last question. As you look ahead, what industries or technologies do you think are going to be obsoleted in the next few years by sustainable alternatives?
So I think that anything that sits idle has a target on its back. So, and specifically assets that businesses are currently paying for. I think that commercial office space is going to change dramatically. I think that retail environments that are closed more than they're open are going to have to reevaluate what those other 12 hours of the day look like. Yeah. And I think business travel specifically is in for a bit of a roller coaster, probably a huge resurgence of it, and then we'll be figuring out if this is something that we actually need to be doing, or if we can be as productive or more productive remotely.
Particularly on the last point, I think we're going to pivot back to a lot of travel, but as a form of virtue signaling, people are going to start to say, I'd rather not travel. I'd rather connect with you remotely and focus more on our relationship than sitting on a plane for 12 hours and pollution that goes with it. There's a lot of opportunity to tap into the emotional component of our experience as business travelers that is yet untapped. Buck, I want to thank you very much for spending time with us today.
Thanks for having me on, Mitch. It's been a lot of fun.
That was Buck Sleeper. He is the Director of Innovation Consulting at EPAM Continuum. That's EPAM Continuum. And you can find them at www.continuuminnovation.com. One long word, continuuminnovation.com. We'll be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, this is Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear, and I hope you will take the time to share this conversation and all of our podcasts with your friends. We want to spread the word about sustainability, folks. Please give us a hand. We appreciate you listening today. Have a green afternoon. And folks, take care of yourselves, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours.